Lucy.
And I'm Michelle.
I did that a bit chirpier this time because I've listened back to old episodes and I sort of come in going, oh, I'm Lucy. I sound so bored.
Okay.
So that was a chirpy one. Welcome to Tudoriferous, the biographical podcast that examines lives in the Tudor era.
And today, Pope Julius II.
Yes.
Yeah.
4 of them, I'm afraid. But the first one is not
4
going
episodes.
to be... Yes, not 4
I
popes.
thought for a second, 4 popes. I was like, no, there's only one Pope with Julius II. I was so confused.
No schisms. Yeah, no, 4 episodes. But this first one is not entirely about him, but I'll come to that in a second because we've got a couple of things to do first.
Okay.
We have new Patreons to thank.
Ooh, welcome.
We have Johnny B, Alison, Mother of Ghosts, Jacob Payne, Jenny Huttonen, Marta Padron Hernando, Mudhooks, and Amy Lacey.
Oh my goodness, thank you. Mother of Ghosts. I want an explanation.
Yes. Yeah, explain yourself. Come on.
Oh, dear.
Right, the second thing, and I'm afraid we're leaping back to Christopher Columbus. Sorry,
no.
but it won't take
Enough
long.
of Christopher Columbus.
We received a very interesting email from Brian, which I'd like to read, because I asked him, he said that's fine to read it.
Okay.
But it's quite interesting, yeah. It's a bit long, but it's worth it. He says, thank you so much for the in-depth analysis into the discoveries, even without inverted commas, of the Americas. I am Latino, brackets indigenous and Spanish background, and had a similar response learning about the atrocities and gradual colonization of the Americas. It helps to know the reaction is more universally understood and that it's out there for others to listen to. My heart does break in knowing that the indigenous peoples across the Americas still to this day suffer as a result of this. 2 things I wanted to share. The first is that many Spanish men arrived in the Americas, however, usually without wives or women. For this reason, the people feel more blended. Racism does exist, but the one-drop rule does not. It's more about whiteness than purity in whiteness, which is notably more prevalent in the Protestant colonies.
Right.
Eventually, tensions would arise between the whiteness classes and the purity of whiteness class, which would be a cause to the collapse of the Spanish Empire in the Americas. But that's another podcast, he says. The other is the role of 700 years of Reconquista, Spanish Crusades, in shaping the doggedly militant, religious, wealth-seeking mindset of the settlers. The righteousness of their approach in conquest, attitudes to servitude and slavery, to make the land economical as their reward, propaganda to demonize the locals, religious zealism, and intolerance of its local customs were all part of this. Seeing the other side to this, I can understand the difficulty Bartolomeo de las Casas, and maybe even his patients, in challenging people who simply wanted to exercise the privileges that their forefathers exercised in the peninsula, and having to persuade others into the understanding of the nuances of colonization. Thank you so much for your last few episodes and shining a light onto this topic. I hope you know that by sharing these stories, it's going beyond being a history podcast. You are helping people understand the political, economic and social challenges that cast a shadow over Latin America and its foundations. So that was nice.
Wow.
And interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was worried people were going to get annoyed with me for constantly being like, why? But yeah, it was horrific. It was absolutely horrific. And we do need to know about it. We need to know about all of it. Otherwise, we just keep repeating the same horrors. And we can't.
Yes. And to know why people did what they did.
Yeah.
It's not just money. It's many, many things.
Yes. Thank you so much for sending that letter, because we honestly were getting a little nervous about that, about how people were going to take it. So I'm really happy with that letter. Thank you.
Yes, that second episode, I was going to do a bit of quite ferocious pruning on it because I thought this is so miserable. But we've had more feedback about that episode than I think we've had any others, apart from the third one in Ferdinand of Aragon.
Right.
So, thank you very much for all your feedback about Christopher Columbus. It's interesting to get it and gratifying. We did the right thing.
Very, very. I've been going around and talking to some of my friends and just random people well, not random people. They're people that I meet.
Entirely random people.
Just stop somebody at a grocery store. No, when I'm going to this is going to make me sound so weird, quilting retreats and group get-togethers for spinning wool. And we get to talk about history, and I bring up Columbus, and we have such a warped view of him as this amazing person. And he was not. He was horrible. So I immediately tell them they're all wrong, which of course makes you so popular.
Yes. A retreat is meant to be a sort of gentle...
Yes. I don't give them all the details. I don't want to ruin today for you, but please look him up or listen to the podcast. I'm not asking you to join, but learn the proper history, because we really need to change the way we look at these people. Yeah. I was astounded. I was shocked when you started talking about some of the stuff, and I'm like, that is not the way we're taught about him at all. No.
I suppose I was starting from a more of a clean slate, I suppose, because we aren't taught about him in England much. I mean, if you want to learn about him, you read a book.
Yeah.
But so I hadn't got so many preconceptions, but yes, I was quite horrified.
Horrified. That's the only way to put it. Horrified. Thank you so much for that letter.
Okay, right. Julius.
Yes.
Right, nearly 10 minutes in and move on to Julius. Yeah, as I say, there were going to be 4 episodes, but only the last 3 will be specifically about him.
Okay.
As today, after 3.5 years of promising, we're finally going to tackle, cue the jingle,
the alum trade. The alum trade. The alum trade.
So, yes, the alum trade. A lot more interesting than you'd think. I know it sounds like, it's going to be something about embargoes and tariffs and things, but no, it's about deviousness and intrigue.
Fantastic.
Yeah, all the sort of stock in trades of the Tudor world. Well, we've looked at John Heron's account book. £30 to the demoiselle that danceth. Considerably less to that man who leapt in Chester. But there was one payee that cropped up again and again that we didn't mention, and that's Ludovice della Fava. Ludovic of the bean, I suppose. Well, that's what fava means. It does mean bean. Yes. Well, he was a very important figure in Henry's court. I think closest to the king, maybe? I don't.
Oh, everybody's closest to the king.
I think they're all shuffling, sort of shoulder to shoulder to get closest.
I'm closest to the king.
And Henry must have trusted him, since Della Fava was in charge of that nice little windfall Henry got from the Treaty of Etaples. Also, he paid the spies, and he was an important link in the chain of what we're talking about today. He was a broker in the Frescobaldi Bank. And a slight irrelevant sideline here, Frescobaldi himself employed an 18-year-old English boy as clerk in his bank by the name of Thomas Cromwell.
Ooh.
Ah, more of that next season.
I can't wait till we talk about him. Because I'm pretty sure we're going to be shocked.
I don't think he's going to be like Mark Rylance at all.
No.
That twinkly eyes.
Gentle.
No.
Yeah.
No. Historians had wondered how it was that Henry could afford to buy people off to the extent that he did. £30,000 to Maximilian, £108,000 to Philip the Fair. I mean, yes, Henry did have the pension from France, and he was siphoning off what used to be government money into that chest under his bed.
Yes.
But £108,000 is a phenomenal amount of money at that time. And we're not modernising it. That is the amount that he gave Philip. God knows what it would add up to now.
Billions, possibly?
Probably, yeah.
Enough for an entire country.
There had to be money coming in from elsewhere to make up this shortfall, and there was. And Ludovico della Fava was right up to his neck in it. The thing with alum is that it's only available in certain places. It was later mined in England, particularly around Middlesbrough, but not until the 17th century.
It is a mineral, correct?
Yeah, but it only comes from rare shale strata in volcanic regions.
Ah,
I mean, it could be in
cool.
volcanic region a very long time ago. I mean, Exeter was a volcanic region. Not anymore.
I wonder if it's around here then.
Yeah, could
Is
be.
it? Well, the Rockies. We've got Baker, St. Helens, the Stikine and Cornelia ranges used to be volcanic, and I think Quesnel Mountain is still a volcano. It's dormant.
Well, the shale was calcined, which is reduced or oxidised, on a brushwood fire and then crystallised by being heated in shallow pan along with the inevitable human urine. I'm not sure how important it is that it's human. I should imagine that's just for ease of collection.
Oh, gosh. I just watched a whole documentary. I, totally hip person that I am, watched an entire documentary on urine.
Excellent, because we thought about doing an episode on it, so perhaps you'll be able to do it.
Surprisingly, what you eat, and especially the water that you're drinking, will change the effectiveness of your urine to turn into aluminum, or, in the case of this documentary I watched, saltpeter for gunfire, for gun weapons, black powder.
Oh, right. So what do you have to eat and drink?
I'm not sure, and I can't for the life of me remember the town, but there was one specific town that everybody was required to use these common urinal places so that they could gather all their urine for saltpeter because it made the best gunpowder.
Well, that's why I was thinking that's why they use human, not animal, because you could insist that everybody...
Although, considering we've got people that are gong farmers, I wonder if somebody just went out and ran under cows with a bucket every time they peed. There's a job. Worst jobs in history.
Well, you're outside. Out in the healthy open air.
I tried to do a search for alum, and it won't let me. It keeps switching it to aluminium or aluminum.
Oh, right.
It refuses to look for alum. Okay.
Do Canadians say aluminium or aluminum?
Depending on where you are. Here in BC, it's aluminum.
Right. Okay. But yeah, I've been thinking the complexity of making this alum. It just made me slightly annoyed that people think that the Middle Ages was, non-scientific, because this process is highly refined chemistry. I mean, you have to know, first of all, to oxidise it and then to heat it with urine. I mean, who discovered all this?
I have no idea. I go through a lot of these things thinking, well, it's going to be the alchemists. But at the same time, they didn't do true scientific theory, which is make a theory, test it constantly and follow your observations. But did they? They had to do some of that. Everybody keeps saying scientific theory doesn't come for quite a few, 100 or 2 years from now. I suppose
studying. They did have a theory to start with. It was just weird, wasn't it?
They were looking for something else and came up with this.
But what amazes me is that not only have they worked out this complicated method of creating alum, but then having done it, they then thought, right, well, what could we use this for?
Yeah.
Well, let's see if it will act as a mordant. Let's see if we can use it in medicines. It's so many different layers to it to get to the point where you know what you want to use it for and how to make it.
Yeah. I have absolutely no idea how anybody would come up with any of the things they did. Like purple dye. You had to get a specific seashell. You had to, it's rank. Watch History's Worst, what is that? Worst Jobs in History with Tony Robinson. And he makes purple dye, and it was just rank. Somebody had to be willing to go through all that stench. And how do you get there? Really? Because the seashell itself doesn't really look purple. How did you know it was going to come up with the royal purple dye? And we find out why tanners live way outside of a city. It stinks.
Yeah. Listening to another podcast about medieval cities and how the city became zoned.
Was it because of the stenches?
Yes, yeah,
Oh,
you've got the
dear.
tanners in one place, the butchers,
Oh, man.
the dyers, yeah, all round the edge. And then the inside, the middle of the city was filled with orchards, and it all sounded really, I mean, it's not at all as I imagined. You imagine it something sort of fetid.
Yeah.
Yeah, but nobody was allowed to throw their urine out of the window. They were fined if they did, so it's not as if you're walking along and suddenly you get sloshed over the head with someone's chamber pot. But
Wonder where we got that myth.
it all sounded really pleasant.
Yeah, as long as you figured out how to send them or place them the common downwind side, not the common upwind side.
Yeah. Anyway, alum. The importance of alum to the late medieval economy was massive. Alum was used in many, many ways, as we've said, as a dye fixer, a mordant in textiles, as a preservative in medicines, paints, tanning, all sorts of stuff. Thomas Penn in The Winter King described it as, quote, a mineral without which the Western economy would grind to a halt, unquote. And it had been used as a mordant since 200 BC, and it's mentioned by Pliny and Herodotus.
And a mordant is a chemical that makes a dye stay in cloth or textiles.
Yes. Yeah. Chaucer mentions it in the Canon's Yeoman's Tale, in a list of stuff needed for alchemy. But there were other mordants, but none was so successful or so easy to use. It could be used at any point in the process, so you could add it to the dye and do it all in one go. You didn't have to have a special mordant processing thing.
Okay, that's cool.
Other mordants were available. Anything with enough tannin, like rhubarb, sumac, pomegranate peel, vinegar, and lemon juice. But they weren't so permanent, and you couldn't create such deep colours. And they had to be done in a separate part of the process, so they took longer.
Okay.
The West had been reliant for alum on the Turkish-controlled Eastern Mediterranean. And we've had 2 episodes on that in Patreon. We've had Mehmed II and Caterina Cornaro. So, we're old hands at the Eastern Mediterranean these days. It was extremely galling for Christendom to be reliant on the Turks for alum. Because never put yourself in the position of being reliant on a potential enemy for something that's vital to your economy.
No, all they have to do is turn off the tap.
Yeah, like Russian oil. Or we talked about the Chinese coins being silver, and they had no silver. They were reliant on other people.
Yeah, ridiculous.
There was alum found in Spain, but it was of an inferior quality, so it was really the Ottomans or nothing. So, imagine their joy when, in 1462, alum was discovered in Tolfa, near Rome. Absolutely masses of it, of really good quality.
And it's close enough to Rome to be part of the Papal States.
Well, yeah, who lives in Rome? Pope Pius II, who was the Pope at that time, said that the profits from the trade would go to, guess what?
The church.
The Crusades.
Oh, the Crusades.
Always the Crusades.
Right.
Yeah, but we've done enough to know that
They
there are
never
no
get to
Crusades. But it did mean that the Pope was able to say, don't buy your alum from the infidel, buy it from me, and the money will go to fighting the infidel.
And you won't get excommunicated.
Yeah, I know, that's the excommunicating thing is a marketing ploy sent from heaven, isn't it?
No kidding.
What wouldn't Bing give to be able to say, don't use Google, use us?
Yes.
Or we'll excommunicate you.
Oh, man, I hope AI is listening and one day it shows up on their website. You're using Chrome and this ad for Bing comes up. Oh, my goodness.
Quote, he, that's the Pope, willingly devoted, set aside, granted, and put to use each and every profit from alum and revenue from the old mine at Tulfis, that's Tolfa, which was established under the temporary dominion of the Church, and which were to be given for the glory of Christ himself, and of the faith, and of the faithful, and for the work and benefit of the Holy Cross, and with ready heart he dedicated them to God Almighty, and to carry out this great endeavour in preserving and distributing that same commodity he appointed the most reverend fathers, unquote.
That was a very long sentence.
All one sentence, yes. So there you are. It's all done for purely spiritual reasons.
I noticed you said in there temporary.
I noticed that, but that's not how it worked.
Yeah.
They might have thought that at the beginning,
Yeah.
but no. And that's this idea that it's spiritual is probably why initially the Pope put the mines in charge of various bishops and cardinals. It just made it look like less of a business and more of a religious enterprise.
Yes.
But by 1463, just 3 years after the discovery of the mines at Tolfa, they were employing about 8,000 people and bringing in 100,000 ducats a year to the papal treasury.
Wow.
So if that's not a business, I don't know what is.
I don't know either. And since they never go on the crusade, that money is used elsewhere.
Yeah, that's your spending money.
Yeah.
Eventually, the papacy handed over the nitty-gritty of the finances to a succession of banks. In 1501, it was the Medici. And we learnt, again, on Patreon, on our Patsy Revolt episode,
Judoriferous Patreon. You know you want to.
that the Medici and the papacy fell out with each other because Pope Alexander, as it was then, didn't think he was getting all he was entitled to from the alum trade.
Ah, they were fiddling the books.
Yes, he suspected they were siphoning it off for their own use. They might have been.
We don't know.
They might not. I don't know. I mean, it's one of these things you think, well, I wouldn't put it past them.
Yeah.
But
I don't have time to go through the finances and all the accounting records to determine if they did. I'm sure somebody has.
oh, I expect so, yeah. I mean, perhaps we'll do an episode on the Medici Bank at some point and find out.
Yes, or Jakob Fugger, his bank accounts.
Yes.
Comparison.
I should imagine, I wonder if he was fairly above board because he didn't need to be dodgy in the slightest because he was just so good at it.
It would be interesting to compare and contrast, especially who loaned what to who. That would be interesting.
Yeah. Okay, well, there you are. There's your homework.
Yeah. Because, okay, we're going to be recording Louis the 11th of France soon for Patreon. And he actually turns off the Medici tap to England and Germany.
Oh, right.
Yes, he's the one that turns it off. So it would be interesting politically to see who loaned to whom at what time. That would be really, really interesting.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure it'll throw up all sorts of dirty dealings that we didn't know anything about. Yes. Yeah, we'll do that sometime.
If we can find the information, that might be a bit of a challenge, but yeah.
After the Medici, Agostino Chigi took over, and he instigated a new and highly illegal system of cartels.
Oh!
This was to get around the monopoly laws, because you can't actually legally say, don't buy it from anybody else or I'll excommunicate you. There are monopoly laws, even if you're the Pope.
Really? The Pope has to abide by monopoly laws?
I would have thought so.
I'm very surprised.
This is a business. I mean, it's...
Yeah, but the Pope is the law unto himself. All he has to say is, I have been given myself a dispensation.
Well, the fact that Chigi had to get round it by creating cartels implies that
Yes.
there was
Yeah,
some
it does.
sort of... Yeah. Chigi was said to be the most ruthless businessman in Italy, and I should imagine there was a fair amount of competition for that role.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. I wonder how many people he killed in the dark.
Well, the Pope, and we're on to Julius by this time,
Did he
couldn't
kill
now
the Pope?
complain. No, sorry, that wasn't a comma. That was full stop. But the Pope couldn't now complain about the returns he was getting from the mines, so he probably turned a blind eye to what Chigi was doing.
Yep.
And Chigi and Julius were very close. I mean, Julius wasn't that fussed
You
about
just
the friends
said
that he
Chigi
kept.
and Judas.
Oh, that was a Freudian slip.
Leave that in. That's awesome.
Chigi helped Julius with the expenses, shall we say, of the papal election. Expenses, bribes, yeah, it's just semantics.
Yes.
He was made treasurer and notary of the Apostolic Camera.
I'm sorry. I don't... What is an apostolic camera?
The finances of the papacy as a whole, I would have thought.
It's a camera.
Camera meaning room. Yeah, he even accompanied Julius on military campaigns. And if you're thinking, hang on a minute, Pope, military campaigns? you wait. Gigi's bank was huge. It employed 20,000 people.
Oh, my goodness.
He became the richest man in Rome, and he was patron of the arts, including Raphael.
Wow, 20,000 people.
Yeah. And he was obviously considered particularly blessed, since the only book I came across about him was called Gli Astri Benigni di Agostino Chigi. That's the benign stars of Agostino Chigi.
Wow.
Anyway, enough about him. Back to the alum. It wasn't that Julius invented the alum trade. As I said, it's been going since 1462. However, he had plans. And his plans involved riding around Italy, killing French people. And that's expensive. And so he bumped up the price of the alum, particularly in the Low Countries, which were extremely dependent on textiles.
Right.
And it's been said that this is one of the main reasons why people started distrusting the Catholic Church. So it might not be a coincidence that Protestantism took hold in the Low Countries.
Yeah.
They were fed up with the Pope overcharging them.
Wow.
Philip and Maximilian, that's Philip the Fair, and Maximilian could see what effect this would have on their economy, and so they convened a conference with a group of merchants. And the merchants said there was only one way out of this: ignore the Pope.
Oh, that's a gutsy move.
It is, but they weren't the first to do this. Charles the Bold, of whom we will hear more in Patreon as well, had told his people they could get their alum from wherever they chose, only to have to backpedal frenetically when the Pope came down on him like a ton of bricks. But he did try. Ferdinand of Aragon thought he could use the Spanish alum, but the Pope made him restrict output from the mine to bump up the price of the toll for alum. I'm amazed that Ferdinand put up with that.
Yeah, me too.
And it must have made the Spanish mines pretty much redundant.
Yes.
And he sold them. Ferdinand sold them soon after. Obviously thought, well, a bit of a white elephant now.
Yeah.
Maximilian and Philip agreed to this plan, the Ignore the Pope plan, since it was the only way to avoid economic disaster.
Yeah.
But I should imagine it took a fair amount of soul-searching, because Maximilian was the Holy Roman Emperor.
But at one point he thought he could be the Pope.
It's true, but he wasn't quite the Holy Roman Emperor, was he? Because he hadn't got his magic crown. But I mean, as far as he was concerned, he was the Holy Roman Emperor. I mean, to ignore the Pope and buy alum from the infidel was a massive choice for him, really.
Yeah.
Although I did wonder if he found that easier to go against Julius in particular because he'd deprived him of his magic crown. He probably thought, I'll show him.
Yeah.
Anyway, this infidel alum money couldn't be seen to be going directly into Maximilian's coffers. There must be some way of laundering it. And there was. Send it through a third country, namely England.
Why does England get that badge?
I expect Henry probably put his hand up and said, me.
Yeah. I'll do it. I'll take a cut.
They decided to do this through the Frescobaldi Bank, represented in England by Ludovico della Fava, who we met at the beginning of the episode. This seems like a dangerous position for Maximilian to get himself into, especially considering how he and Henry had a very on-off relationship. I mean, surely Henry could have held this over him and said, you know, you've got Perkin Warbeck.
Yeah.
What do you think the Pope would say if he knew what you were up to? But the fail-safe was that Henry was in it just as much as Maximilian.
Yes, he likes money.
So he likes money. Yeah, and he's got as much to lose since from the moment he had won / usurped the throne, he had done all he could to keep in with the Pope, short of actually going on crusade, obviously. Yeah, also, why would he shoot the cash cow? And as we'll see, this cash cow could be milked for very large sums indeed. A quick look at the Frescobaldi Bank. They had started in the 13th century in the Italian enclave in Bruges, and they specialised mainly in cloth, which figures in Bruges. They financed several European countries, including England, where they controlled the sales of English wool. They financed Edward I's wars, taking over from the previous bank, which Edward had bankrupted for non-payment of debts.
Oh, goodness. Why are you taking it over? That'd be terrifying.
I don't know. They were also receivers of customs in England and papal tax collectors. They helped finance the Crusades because they used to have crusades in those days.
That seems to be a bit monopoly-ish, putting all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah. It's not good for either side, I don't think.
No.
In Edward II's reign, things went downhill for the bank and they had to leave the country quite sharpish because there was a backlash against foreigners involving themselves in the king's affairs. And this all stemmed from the bitterness against the influence of Piers Gaveston, the king's favourite. The bank never got its money back and was made bankrupt. I don't know why any of these banks have anything to do with England, and particularly anything to do with people called Edward. They seem to have very bad credit ratings.
Although, if you don't, what could the king do to you? Probably a lot.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, if you're an Italian bank, are you frightened of the English king?
If you have some in the country, a bank in that country, I would be.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, how much do the banks, this is something I don't know, do the banks actually hold physical cash? Because I don't think they do much now.
No, they don't now. Well, we know that you could go to a bank with a banker's draft. You could collect a banker's draft in Florence and go to Milan and hand it over and they would give you money.
Yes.
So they must, they must have cash. Yeah.
Ooh, I wonder.
We'll have to look into banking.
And their security. Because it's not like, well, no, they had iron.
They must have had quite a big bodyguard section, I think. That's probably what takes up most of the 20,000 people, I should think. It's great big thumping people.
Yeah. Thumping people.
I was thinking thumping in size, but yeah, thumping as an activity as well. The Frescobaldi Bank was obviously up and running to a certain extent, in time to facilitate the little scam that Henry and Maximilian had cooked up. And the Frescobaldi are still around, but they make wine now. They're not a bank.
Yeah, we learned. Thank you. Wine doesn't hit.
Anyway, back to the alum. As I said, Henry had made sure that he was head boy of the Pope. I have a vague recollection from one of the episodes that the Pope read out something that Henry had written and said to all the other rulers, why can't you be more like Henry?
Oh, wow. Golden boy.
Yes, he'd sent Julius gifts and congratulations on his election, and he gave offices to Julius's friends and relations, so that always goes down well with popes, doesn't it?
Yes.
Especially the relations.
And Henry rather needed it when he first took over the crown.
He did, yes.
He even used a papal bull to stop a rebellion.
Yep. And Henry was still doing it above board. He had a contract with Agostino Chigi to import papal alum like a good boy.
Okay.
Even when he was up to his neck in the illegal trade.
Well,
it was a sort of
course.
Cover.
Yeah.
Because otherwise the Pope would be thinking, why don't you need alum anymore?
Exactly.
This is weird. Certainly as early as 1486, there was an incident that shows that there was some dodgy dealings going on even then. There was a Genoese merchant trading in England called Negrone, like the cocktail. Negrone heard of a Spanish ship on its way to the Low Countries with a consignment of alum. And I don't know whether that's Ottoman alum or Spanish alum. It wasn't papal alum, that's the important thing.
Okay.
And he did what any competent merchant would do.
Ratted him out.
No, he did more than that. He hired English pirates, had them board the ship, killed some of the crew and commandeered the ship and its cargo.
Wow, that's a bit extreme.
People didn't do things by half measures in those days.
No, but that was unexpected.
His plan was to give the proceeds of the cargo to the papal treasury. Maybe he was doing it out of love of God, maybe to keep in with the Pope, maybe he got a hefty cut, I don't know.
Hefty cut.
Another merchant got involved, and he pointed out there was no actual laws against the free trade of alum in England. And so, if anyone should keep the cargo, it should be Henry. This case went on and on and on, and dragged in the Pope, who obviously favoured Negroni's point of view. No, I'll have
the money, thank you.
But Henry said, what can I do? There are no laws in my country forbidding this. Nothing I can do.
I may be king, but I can't make the law.
Yes, I can't tell people what to do.
Yeah.
So much as I might like to accommodate the Pope, hands are tied. Especially since Henry then said, quote, he was new to the kingdom, unquote. So, he couldn't
rock the boat. Gotcha.
Yeah. Everyone seems to be very conveniently forgetting there were laws against piracy at this time.
No, there aren't.
You weren't meant to board other people's boats and kill the crew in English waters. But all of this was pre-Julian, and it shows that Henry was quite open to a bit of alum-based subterfuge even before he had this deal with Maximilian. And the merchant who sided with Henry, we think, was probably De Fava. It was definitely De Fava who explained the Frescobaldi plan to Henry in 1504, and Henry was apparently delighted with the idea. And why not? He was fed up with paying through the nose for papal alum as well. So he got a double benefit, not paying huge amounts, and he gets a little bit of pocket money. Quite a bit, in fact.
Yeah.
It was Henry who lent the money to the Frescobaldi, which seems an odd way to run a bank, but there we go. Maybe because Edward II had bankrupted them, they've become more go-betweens than bankers, I think. He also licensed ships to do the Ottoman alum run, the Sovereign and the Regent. And they were his largest and best-gunned ships, so
those
shows
are the
how
ship's
important
names.
the alum trade was. Yeah, sorry. Yes. Yeah, he's the Sovereign.
Yeah.
The alum was then sent on to the Low Countries after he had collected it in the ships. So what was in it for Henry? Was he doing this out of the kindness of his heart? No. Quite apart from getting cheap alum, he charged huge custom duties and a fee for leasing the ships. But it just shows how much Julian was charging that it was still cheaper to pay Henry's custom duties. All Henry had to do was to pretend it wasn't happening. All the actual work was done by De Fava, Frescobaldi, and Edmund Dudley.
Oh.
And we're talking about big money for Henry.
Yeah.
In a single deal, he pocketed duties of £15,166, 13 shillings and fourpence.
Wow.
And this puts in perspective the loans, in inverted commas, that he gave Maximilian and Philip, since Maximilian's loan of £30,000 represented just a couple of consignments.
Yeah.
It's not just the direct financial gains Henry got from the alum, it was that now England had autonomy over all aspects of the making of fine cloth.
Yeah.
They weren't reliant on anyone. Well, I suppose they're reliant on the Ottomans, ultimately, but they always have been, so... And we can see the English economy have a steady growth for the first two-thirds of his reign, and then suddenly rocket as the cloth trade was able to flourish unhindered by the Pope. I don't know at what point Julius cottoned on to what was happening. Very soon, it seems, since by 1504 he decided to put his foot down.
Well, I mean, he's just lost 2 countries' worth of alum trade.
Yeah,
So you'd have to respond fairly quickly.
probably the main purchasers as well.
Yeah.
He used his ultimate weapon, although he was a warrior pope, so he probably had quite a few weapons, but he used the ultimate one, a papal bull. And this was directed, quote, to all persons, secular or ecclesiastical, or whatever state or condition they might be, unquote.
What other state and condition could they be?
Well, effectively he's saying, so that includes you, Maximilian and Henry. I don't care if you're kings.
Rulers. Got it.
Yes. It forbade, under pain of anathema, all Christian princes and their subjects from buying alum from anywhere else other than the papal mines, since the profits were, quote, reserved and consecrated to the preparation for the Great Crusade against the Sultan of Constantinople, unquote. And it is going to happen, just as soon as I've finished killing all the French people, I'm going to be straight out there killing infidels. He's a lovely Pope.
Yeah.
The bull was taken to every banking house and every merchant's enclave, warning them that anyone who traded in illegal infidel alum was, quote, the source of a pernicious contagion to the souls of the faithful, unquote.
Really?
It also listed traders to avoid.
These are the bad guys.
These are the bad guys. It's Girolamo Frescobaldi, the skipper of one of Henry's ships, Nicholas Waring, and Ludovico della Fava. Now, it might sound to us like blatant greed and very unchristian capitalism, but that's not how the Pope and his cronies saw it. As far as they were concerned, anyone who was part of the illegal trade was not only handing money directly to the Ottomans,
True.
money that might be used to finance a war against Christendom,
True.
but they were taking money away from the Crusade Fund and so lessening the chance of Christendom actually winning that war.
True.
And by saturating the market with alum, they were lowering the value for everyone. They were scuppering the war against the Sultan from both directions. And yeah, I think he has a point.
Yes, he does have a point. If that's what he was really going to do with the money.
Probably thought that's what he was going to do.
Yeah, I can see Pope Julius thinking that.
But also, it's quite odd that this hike in prices occurred just when he was thinking, right, I need troops. I need to get the French out. I need to sort the Venetians out. Mm-hmm. They're not the infidel.
No, they're not.
There was panic in the Low Countries. Margaret of Austria, for whom Henry's portrait with the little fingers was commissioned, convened a meeting of her council to discuss the situation. But Henry seems to have been a lot more sanguine. And I suppose his stance has been right from the start, I know nothing about this, don't blame me. Any change in attitude would now demonstrate that he did know a lot about it.
Yes.
And also we know that his outward persona towards things that were really getting to him was to say, I'm not bothered.
Yeah,
Perkin
true.
Warbeck, not bothered. Papal bulls?
Who cares?
Yeah, not bothered. Yeah. Julius was nagging Henry to join the crusade, which Henry would have been happy to do in theory. He had given money to both the Pope and the Hospitallers and had been made protector of the Knights' garrison on Rhodes. And I don't know what that entails, really. But, it shows willing, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. But the problem was that Henry didn't see it as part of the crusade to attack Venice. And, as we'll see later, Julius very much did, since Venice was a tad ambivalent about their relations with the Ottomans.
Yeah.
But England needed to keep in with Venice for reasons of trade. And we saw in Roger Machado's episode that he had Venetian glass hidden away in his vault in Southampton.
Yes.
So England did a lot of trade with Venice. Didn't want to scupper it.
Venice was their main partner when Henry was there, weren't they? And then they shifted to Burgundy. No, the war with Burgundy, or the battles with Burgundy, shifted them to Venice as their primary trading partner. Right.
Yeah, that would make sense,
Yeah.
yes, because they got a mutual embargo, hadn't they?
Yes.
Julius was trying to align everyone against Venice, which was, the last thing Henry wanted. Also, Henry did considerable trade with Genoa, and the Pope was not above trying to take Genoa whenever he happened to be passing, as we'll find out in his episode. It was never successful, but he always had a go. To show how little Henry cared about the papal bull, when Della Fava and Edmund Dudley came to him in a few months after the publishing of the bull and gave the king the opportunity to be in on a £10,000 consignment of alum, Henry almost bit their hands off. And this is all in Dudley's account book, and it's all signed off by the king. So he may have been sticking his fingers in his ears and going la la la, but we know for a fact he knew about it. He knew all about it. Henry bought the cargo for £6,000, which is a lot of money.
Yes.
But he charged £5,100 for the lease of the ship.
Oh.
Which is a huge amount just for the lease of a ship.
Yeah.
Plus, he could now be able to charge custom duties and the cost of the alum he sold on. Also, he would have cheap alum on the proportion he decided to keep.
Yeah.
And as I said, this was barely 3 months after Julius's decree that anyone who took part in the trade was a source of pernicious contagion, and that no one should have anything to do with Frescobaldi or De Fava. I don't think that Edmund Dudley was mentioned in the Pope's list, but
He should have been.
I felt it's probably best to keep your distance from Edmund Dudley anyway, isn't it?
Horrible person.
Pope Julius was hopping mad with Henry.
Yeah.
He knew exactly what had gone on. In 1505, Julius was chasing the sovereign around the Mediterranean, not himself, obviously, he sent people off to do it. And he was writing to all the rulers from Portugal to Genoa, telling them to stop that ship. He promised indulgences to anyone who caught the ship and impounded the cargo. And he said quite categorically it was on pain of anathema. He told the commissioner he'd sent to hand the bull to Henry, Pietro Grifo, to come back to Rome, and on his way he was to stick the papal bull to the door of every church he passed.
Oh, thank goodness, to the door.
To the door. Yes, to the face of every priest he passed. There was going to be no claiming ignorance about this.
Yeah.
However, we can see an entry in John Heron's wonderful account book, quote, Pope's orator, Peter de Grifo, for licence and custom of 1,300 quintals, that's 100 weight, of alum, to come in by assent of Ludovico della Fava, £433, 6 shillings and 8 by obligation, unquote.
So they bought him off.
He's gone over to the dark side.
Yeah.
He's gone there, thought, actually, this is really clever.
Yeah, I
could make a fortune in this. So there was a nice little link with one of our other episodes. At the Italian end of the Pope's alum deal, the proper the kosher one,
Yeah.
we can call it that, was Giovanni Cavalcanti, who was not only immensely rich, but he was very keen on the visual arts. He was patron to both Michelangelo and Torrigiano. And things were getting pretty tricky for Torrigiano. He was being outshone by Michelangelo.
Yes.
And he'd just punched him in the face and felt his nose go down like a biscuit.
Yes.
It really would probably be better if he were elsewhere.
Yep. Time to
And
run.
it seems it was Cavalcanti, with his English alum connections, who suggested he get away from Michelangelo by going to England.
Ah, and then he
They've
made
got no art there. They'll think you're wonderful.
And he was wonderful.
Yeah.
His
I mean, it's
effigies
anything
are
to get
just
away from
gorgeous.
that winsome smile school of art that England had got himself in. And Cavalcanti was thinking that Henry would be only too pleased to have his own tame Italian artist, which obviously he was. So, good PR for everyone. And Torrigiano arrived just in time to start building the tomb. So, while he was in England, he stayed with Della Fava, and that was his way into the English court. So, there were links everywhere. Now let us see what Henry VIII did with his father's cash cow.
The alum tray. The alum tray. The alum tray. The alum tray.
That one was in the minor key, so you can tell it's not going to be good. It wasn't entirely his fault, except that he's the king and the buck stops there. He wasn't like Dad. He didn't spend ages poring over his accounts.
No, he spent ages spending money.
Yeah, spending money, jousting, sumptuous clothes. Yeah. He left all the count stuff to Wolsey. Mm-hmm. Wolsey was an ambitious man. He quite liked to be pope. So he wasn't going to scupper his chances by upsetting Rome. And it wasn't long before the illicit alum trade had been abandoned and England was getting its alum from Tolfa. And this meant not only was the alum cripplingly more expensive, but that England no longer had autonomy over its cloth trade. Mm-hmm. It was reliant on
The Pope.
keeping in with the Pope. It meant that in the unlikely event that Henry VIII were ever to displease the Pope in any way, alum, or the withholding of it, could be used as a weapon.
Foreboding.
Well, no, that's only if Henry VIII should ever displease the Pope in any way. I mean, it's not going to happen.
No, never.
Well, it won't be a surprise to anyone to find out that he did displease the Pope. First by wanting to divorce Catherine of Aragon, and then by the dissolution of the monasteries, and sure enough the Pope put an embargo on alum into England. And this was backed inevitably by Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, who felt Henry's divorce from his aunt was a slight to the whole family.
Yes.
The combination of the loss of revenue from the cloth trade and the loss of the little scam his dad had set up with the Low Countries, whereby he could pocket the money for the shipping the stuff and the customs, and Henry VIII's military escapades, meant that he was soon short of money. His dad had set him up nicely. I think how he must have despaired to see how quickly his son went through
No
it all.
kidding. He's up in heaven going, what the hell? Just wait till you get up here, boy.
Yes. Can I have words with you?
Or down here, depending on where he is.
Yeah. I think we know.
Yeah. Look down.
So it meant that not only did Henry VIII have to go after the bigger, more lucrative monasteries, but he also had to go running to Parliament for money.
Yeah.
This is something his dad had battled to all his reign to avoid. I wondered if there were repercussions right down to the Civil War for this.
What do you mean?
Because, well, one of the problems for Charles I was that he didn't want to go to Parliament to go begging for money, did he?
Right. No, he did not.
Yeah. And understandably, I mean, really, I suppose.
And Henry VIII ended up giving them more power.
Well, we're not going to get to Charles. So
Are you finally
we'll have
giving
to
up on
leave
the
that
Stuarts?
hanging. I'm not sure about the Elizabethans, frankly, never mind the Stuarts.
Aw.
Various court cases concerning the illicit trade went against the merchants and in favour of the Pope, whereas Henry VII had done his damnedest to protect those engaged in the illicit trade. His son had hanged them out to dry.
Oh, yeah. What an idiot. I'm sorry. Anybody who said Henry VIII was the greatest king is delusional.
Well, he might be said to be more moral than his father. He didn't want to go against the Pope and trade with the infidel.
Is that morality, though?
Well, from reading the sources, it seems more likely he didn't understand the importance of it.
Yeah.
Wolsey, who was looking for that pair of purple slippers, was pushing him to accept the Pope's inflated alum prices. And at this point, the Frescobaldi Bank went bankrupt again.
Again.
They must be thinking, why do we go
Yeah,
there?
why did we
go
start
to
again?
England? We can't trust the English. What followed was an economic disaster. Henry continued to spend. He no longer had that French nest egg, since that had been dependent on England not invading France. And he'd just put a stop to his dad's dodgy but lucrative dealings. However, in 1527, something happened that could have changed everything for England. Charles V and his band of ragged, starving troops were marching on Rome. We heard about that in Isabella d'Este's episode on Patreon, and we'll get to hear it again when we do a cameo episode on Julius's amazing daughter, and we'll cover it next season. Pope Leo, as it was now, was in a very difficult situation. To fight off Charles, he needed troops. And to pay troops, he needed money. Mm-hmm. So with a cringeworthy example of short-termism, brought on by panic, he decided he would sell off the Tolfa alum mines.
What? Okay, you're an idiot.
I mean, there must have been loads of people saying to him, please don't do that.
Sell off your
That's
silver.
where our money comes from. Yeah.
Don't sell off what brings you income. Sell off what doesn't bring you income.
Well, Henry could have bought them. Not sure where he got the money, but he could probably have got a loan on the basis of having the alum mines, I would have thought.
Yeah, but then they're so far away, somebody would just walk in and take them. It's a pretty dodgy purchase.
Well, people are buying things all over. Fugger had things in Poland and
True.
Austria and all sorts of places, didn't he?
Yeah.
He could have returned England to having autonomy over its most important business in the country, but he didn't do it. And why not? Because 1527 was the year when he wanted to divorce Catherine of Aragon.
Yeah.
And he wanted to keep in the Pope's good books. I didn't really understand why buying the mines would have turned the Pope against him, since the Pope wanted to sell and Henry wanted to buy, but that's how Henry saw it. Let's not rock the boat with the Pope, because I need him now. In 1546, a year before his death, Pope Clement, as it was then, banned all alum exports to England, thanks to Henry's shenanigans. So once he heard about the monasteries and Anne Boleyn and, the whole caboodle.
What the?
Yes. He said, what's going on over there? And yes, England could no longer dye its own cloth. And this was huge.
You're just done.
Clement even sequestered his own alum from the ports in London, even though doing so was very expensive and he lost money on that. So you can see just how annoyed he is with Henry.
Yeah.
Henry's reaction to this was to scour England for alum of its own. As I mentioned, alum was found at a much later date, so it wasn't a stupid idea, but Henry didn't find any. His other attempt to put things right was to limit imports of cloth. Quote, an act limiting the prices of hats, bonnets and caps made to sea and brought to be sold in this realm, unquote. And quote, an act against regters and gatherers of wools, unquote. I'm not sure, regulators, I think it is. Okay. It's got an apostrophe. And, quote, an act repelling a grant lately made by the King's Highness to the citizens of York for the shipping of stain wools, that's probably dyed wools, yeah, onto the port of Hull, unquote. And this was followed by the Great Debasement, when the coinage was debased, meaning that cloths lost even more of their value.
Yes.
The Yorkshire Guide, published in Henry VIII's reign, put it quite succinctly, quote, Henry VIII broke with the Catholic Church and declared himself head of the Church of England. Off the back of this, the Pope refused to supply alum to England. This meant that the brightly coloured textile production stopped in England, as we were unable to gain supply of the dye fixant from Europe in any quantity. Mm-hmm. There was an urgency to find the correct rocks and produce alum in England, and patents were granted for the production in Cornwall, Devon and the Isle of Wight. All these failed, as we now know the rocks were unsuitable, unquote. One of the articles I read came at this from quite an interesting angle. The writer, Kira Zapf, is a textile historian. She came over from America to study Tudor textiles, but she noticed that for this period, the 1540s or so, there just weren't so many textiles to study.
Okay. Oh, because they couldn't make them.
Yeah, well, she wondered why not and came to the conclusion, yes, there was fewer being made, and also because the textiles with such an inferior quality, they haven't survived.
Oh, okay.
So she referred to this as a textile dark age for England.
Huh.
Yes, that's why she looked into it, because she thought, where is it all? Why
don't we have it?
Why isn't there any? So we can list the things that seem to be dependent on this bypassing of papal alum. Under Henry VII, Henry's foreign policy, he used loans as a negotiating tool. Henry VII was able to rule without constantly having to run to the Parliament for money. England was able to control all aspect of its cloth trade. Protestantism in the Low Countries. And this is just speculation on my part, but could it be that the Ottomans might be less likely to wage war on Christendom because it would scupper the alum trade with them? Don't know, but possibly. Under Henry VIII, England no longer had autonomy over all aspects of the cloth trade. Henry had to go to Parliament for money. The economic downturn led to the debasement of the coinage, which was a very unpopular move. Fewer and not such good quality textiles were being made. Presumably poverty amongst those whose livelihood was cloth. But a warm glow of moral well-being at having done the right thing. So, that's the story of the alum trade in 2 reigns.
What a mess.
Yes, I mean, I can see the Pope's point of view.
So can I.
But I can also see Henry's.
Yes, so can I. Like, you can't just tell people they have to buy from you.
And then just raise the price so that it becomes impossible to do so.
Poorly done all round, really.
Yes, I think Julius was thinking, well, I'm doing the right thing here. I'm getting the French out. I'm sorting the Venetians out. We're going to go to have a crusade. Whatever it takes.
Yeah.
But he wasn't really thinking, but whatever it takes, it's going to be the economic disaster in other countries. So,
oops.
So that was, although it's officially the first episode of Julius, it was not very much about Julius and more about alum. So next week, backgroundy stuff. So next week we'll start on little Julius. Julius the Pope.
Little Julius.
The warrior Pope.
Yeah, you can't really call him Little Julius, though.
I don't know why I called him little Julius. I was thinking we'd be starting at his childhood, but we're not really. We don't know much about his childhood. So he won't be little Julius. He'll be full-size Julius.
Okay. See you next time. Thank you for listening.
See you next week. Bye.
Bye.